China, one of the world's largest beef markets, has stopped importing beef from the United States and has turned to Australia to fill the gap. This move is costing U.S. cattle ranchers billions. So, what's behind this decision? How did we get here? And what does it mean for ranchers, consumers, and the global economy? First, let's set the stage. The U.S. beef industry has been a powerhouse, exporting massive amounts of beef worldwide. In 2024 alone, the U.S. sent $1.6 billion worth of beef to China, making it the third largest market for American ranchers. But now, that trade has come to a screeching halt. Why, Mai? It's not just about taste preferences or supply chains, it's deeply tied to trade tensions and strategic moves on the global stage. To understand the impact, we need to look at the U.S. cattle industry. Ranchers across states like Texas, Nebraska, and Kansas rely on exports to keep their businesses thriving. China's demand for high-quality, grain-fed beef has been a lifeline, especially as domestic beef prices face pressure from inflation and supply chain issues. But with China's doors now closed, the ripple effects are hitting hard. Some estimates suggest losses could reach $2.5 billion or more for U.S. ranchers, as China was a key buyer of premium cuts. Now let's talk about what triggered this. It's no secret that U.S.-China relations have been rocky, especially when it comes to trade. Recently, escalating tariffs have turned beef into a pawn in a larger economic chess game. After the U.S. imposed new tariffs on Chinese goods, China hit back with retaliatory measures, including a whopping 116% tariff on American beef. That kind of tax makes U.S. beef way too expensive for Chinese buyers, effectively pricing it out of the market. But it's not just tariffs. There's another layer here. Hundreds of U.S. abattoirs, those are the facilities that process beef, have lost their export licenses to China. These licenses, tied to a 2020 trade deal, were supposed to renew automatically, but China hasn't approved them. About 300 U.S. plants are now ineligible to ship beef to China, and that's no small glitch. It's a deliberate move, and it's left American ranchers scrambling. Let's rewind a bit. Back in 2020, the U.S. and China signed the Phase 1 trade deal under President Trump. It was meant to ease tensions and boost agricultural exports, including beef. For a while it worked. China became a top destination for American beef. But fast forward to 2025, and that deal is unraveling. China's not just slapping on tariffs, it's using what experts call non-tariff barriers, things like delaying licenses or citing sanitary concerns to quietly choke off U.S. exports. It's a tactic Beijing has used before, and it's effective. So, where does Australia come in? With U.S. beef sidelined, China needed a new supplier, and Australia was ready to step up. Australian grain-fed beef exports to China have surged by nearly 40% in just February and March of this year compared to last year. That's over 21,000 tons of beef shipped in 2 months alone. Australia's cattle industry is cashing in, filling the gap with high-quality marbled beef that Chinese consumers love. For Aussie ranchers, it's a golden opportunity. Here's the kicker. Australia isn't just a backup plan. It's now the lone supplier of premium grain-fed beef to China. That's a massive shift. Australian beef is competitive in price and quality, and with no U.S. competition, they're locking in contracts and building relationships that could last years. For U.S. ranchers, it's not just about losing sales today. It's about losing market share for the long haul. I spoke with folks in the U.S. cattle industry, not directly, but through the grapevine, and the mood is grim. One rancher told a reporter, "We've spent years building trust with Chinese buyers, and now it's gone overnight." The financial hit is brutal, but there's also a sense of betrayal. Ranchers feel caught in the crossfire of decisions made far from the ranch. And with the U.S. cattle herd already at a 74-year low due to droughts, this couldn't have come at a worse time. Now let's be real. Trade wars have consequences, and this one's hitting rural America hard. But is it all doom and gloom? Not entirely. Some analysts say U.S. ranchers could pivot to other markets like Japan or South Korea, which are still big buyers of American beef. The problem? Those markets can't fully replace China's demand, and rebuilding trust with new buyers takes time. Plus, with Australian beef flooding China, prices could drop globally, squeezing U.S. profits even more. What about consumers? In China, this shift might not change much at the grocery store. Australian beef is similar in quality, and China's middle class is still hungry for it. But there's a bigger question. If trade tensions keep escalating, could China's economy slow down? If that happens, demand for all beef, Australian or otherwise, might take a hit. It's a reminder that global markets are interconnected, and what starts as a tariff can end up affecting dinner plates halfway across the world. Let's break it down. For Australia, this is a win, at least for now. Their cattle industry gets a massive boost, and they're strengthening ties with China. But there's a catch. Relying too heavily on one market can backfire if China's economy stumbles. For the U.S., it's a tough blow, but it could push ranchers to diversify and innovate. The challenge is navigating the short-term pain while trade policies play out. So, what's next? The ball's in the court of policymakers. Some in the U.S. are calling for retaliation, like tariffs on Australian beef or restrictions on other Chinese imports. Others argue for diplomacy to reopen China's market. On the flip side, China's playing hardball, showing it can flex its muscle without firing a shot. This isn't just about beef, it's about who controls the global food supply chain. Here's my take. Trade disputes like this reveal how fragile global markets can be. U.S. ranchers are paying a steep price, but this could be a wake-up call to rethink how we approach trade and food security. Australia's seizing the moment, but no one's immune to the ups and downs of geopolitics. What do you think? Should the U.S. fight fire with fire, or is there a smarter way to get back in the game?
Since retaking the White House, he's announced a 25% tariff on all cars. The US president claimed the measures would spur growth in the US car industry.
You thought Trump's 25% auto tariffs would revive American manufacturing, didn't you? The promise was bold. Force companies like Toyota, Honda, and Hyundai to build cars in the U.S., hire American workers, and breathe life back into factory towns. But in 2025, the reality is a gut punch. 2 million cars, 12% of the U.S. market, won't be sold this year, not because of part shortages or lack of demand, but because everyday Americans can't afford them. Trump's America First tariffs didn't bring jobs home. They sent automakers packing, jacked up prices, and left workers and consumers to pick up the pieces. The logic behind the tariffs seems simple. Slap a 25% tax on vehicles built outside the U.S., and automakers would rush to open factories stateside. Instead, companies like Toyota and Honda didn't blink. They shifted production to Mexico. Hyundai, Kia, and Nissan followed suit, breaking ground on new plants south of the border. Why? Mexico offers cheap labor, stable trade agreements like the USMCA, and freedom from the U.S.'s unpredictable policy swings. According to a 2024 Bloomberg report, automakers invested $6.9 billion in Mexican factories last year alone, while U.S. plant expansions stalled. The tariffs meant to protect American workers are driving jobs away. The real pain, though, hits American consumers. That SUV you've been eyeing? Add $3,000 to $12,000 to the sticker price, thanks to tariffs on vehicles and parts like engines, transmissions, and even bolts. In 2019, the average new car cost $34,000 per Edmunds. Today, it's $48,000, a 41% jump in 6 years, fueled by tariffs and inflation. Toyota claims it's absorbing some costs for now, but that's a temporary fix. With tariffs hiking the price of raw materials and components, those costs will soon land in your driveway. The average monthly car payment has already hit $784, with loan interest rates at 7%, the highest since 2008, according to Edmunds. Automakers are caught in a policy roller coaster. One day, tariffs are enforced. The next, they're delayed or tweaked. This unpredictability makes it impossible to price vehicles, secure supplier contracts, or forecast sales. You can't plan a business on a tweet, a Toyota executive told Reuters in 2024. The chaos is crippling an industry that thrives on stability. Small businesses, the backbone of the auto sector, are collapsing under the weight. Did you know 80% of U.S. automotive suppliers employ fewer than 50 people? These mom-and-pop shops produce critical parts like clips, sensors, and modules, but tariffs have spiked their raw material costs overnight. A 2023 Motor and Equipment Manufacturers Association report found that 30% of small suppliers faced layoffs or reduced hours due to rising import costs. Some have shuttered entirely. When one supplier fails, the whole production line grinds to a halt. No parts, no cars, no sales, no jobs. The numbers paint a grim picture. 2 million unsold cars, as projected by Cox Automotive, represent a $96 billion hit to the economy. Up to 50,000 auto jobs are at risk, per a 2024 Center for Automotive Research estimate. Factory towns in Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee, once the heartbeat of American manufacturing, are hemorrhaging. Michigan alone lost 8,000 auto jobs since the 2018 tariffs, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Entire communities are watching their economic futures evaporate. This isn't the first time tariffs have backfired. In 2018, Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs cost automakers billions. Ford reported a $1 billion profit loss tied to higher metal prices, per a 2019 earnings call. Now, history is repeating on a grander scale. Trump touts greatness on social media. But what's great about soaring prices, shuttered plants, and families priced out of the market? The fallout doesn't stop at car lots. If new cars become unaffordable, demand for used vehicles will surge, driving those prices up too. Low-income families already stretched thin will feel the squeeze most. The dominoes are falling, and the auto industry is just the start. What's the way forward? Tariffs aimed to protect workers, but ended up punishing them. A smarter approach, stable trade policies, incentives for domestic innovation, and workforce training could rebuild the industry without breaking consumers. For now, Americans are left with a broken promise: fewer jobs, higher prices, and an industry on the brink. Will we rethink this strategy before the next domino falls?
General Motors, over its announcement that it's going to drop 14,000 jobs in North America and close 5 plants as well.
General Motors announced today it is slashing its workforce by as many as 14,000 employees.
You remember the promise, right? Bring the jobs back, rebuild Detroit, punish the corporations that offshored American labor. That was the slogan stamped on podiums, campaign buses, and the front lawns of working-class towns across the Rust Belt. But today, General Motors just proved that promise was never meant to be kept. In one brutal announcement, GM slashed 14,000 American jobs and shut down 5 U.S. factories. Not because they had to, but because they could. GM's move wasn't a fluke. It was the continuation of a strategy that began years ago. Back in 2018, the company cut 15,000 workers and shuttered plants in Ohio and Michigan. They blamed market conditions. Fast forward to 2025, and the story repeats. Only now it's wrapped in a shinier, greener narrative, the EV revolution. But there's nothing revolutionary about abandoning American workers. While politicians tout electric vehicles as a pathway to national renewal, GM is using them as a passport out of the country. Take a look at the numbers. GM has invested over $6 billion in EV production, but not here. That money is flowing into factories in Mexico, South Korea, and China. In fact, as of the first quarter of 2025, more than 40% of GM's vehicle output comes from overseas. By early next year, that figure is projected to exceed 50%. Meanwhile, towns like Lordstown, Ohio, and Romulus, Michigan, once proud outposts of American manufacturing, now face economic ruin. And while this is happening, where's the leadership? Donald Trump, the man who once threatened to slap punitive tariffs on any company that outsourced jobs, has done nothing but tweet. His administration's 200% EV import tariff might sound tough, but GM didn't flinch. They pivoted. They shifted their production to international platforms and called it market flexibility. The result? American jobs lost, while GM's stock rebounded within 48 hours thanks to growing international profits. The financials don't lie. In 2024, GM pulled in over $32 billion in revenue from global markets. And while American EV buyers struggled with rising prices and interest rates, GM was selling overseas, to countries with cheaper labor, fewer regulations, and bigger subsidies. The average price of a new electric vehicle in the U.S. has risen by 18% year over year. A base model Chevy Blazer EV now sells for over $53,000. That's not middle-class mobility. That's a luxury tax on patriotism. But GM isn't alone. Ford just paused its electric F-150 production in Dearborn, Michigan, and redirected $2.4 billion to EV development in Valencia, Spain. Stellantis now builds more Jeeps in Italy than it does in Illinois. Even Tesla, the crown jewel of U.S. innovation, is turning to China and India to cut costs and expand battery supply. The truth is unavoidable. The so-called American EV boom is quietly becoming an offshore operation. Let's be honest, this isn't about green energy. It's about green money. And while the U.S. government talks about leading the transition, our factories are closing, our workers are getting pink slips, and our supply chains are increasingly dependent on geopolitical rivals. That's not leadership, that's surrender. What makes GM's betrayal sting even more is our history. Let's not forget, we bailed them out in 2009 with $50 billion in taxpayer funds. They called it a rescue. We called it loyalty. We save them from collapse, and they repay us by turning off the lights in towns that once kept them alive. It's not just corporate strategy, it's a moral failure. And where's the accountability? These corporations aren't punished, they're rewarded. Stock prices rise. Executives collect bonuses. Factories get moved. Communities get gutted. And the American worker? Forgotten again. So the next time someone says buy American, ask them, who still builds American? Because it's not enough to slap a flag on the fender. It's not enough to call it a Chevy if it's assembled in Monterey with Chinese batteries and Indian software. What matters is where it's built, who builds it, and whether they're paid a living wage to do it. GM's EV shift might be good for shareholders. It might even be good for the global supply chain. But don't call it American progress. Not when the cost is thousands of jobs, shuttered factories, and another chapter in the long, slow death of industrial America. Because this isn't just about electric cars. It's about who controls the future and who gets left behind.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated.
And really the question is, where's that going to come in? Where's that going to land? And we don't know that yet.
Shockwaves are reverberating across California's political and economic landscape. In an unprecedented showdown, Governor Gavin Newsom and Attorney General Rob Bonta have launched a high-stakes legal assault against President Donald Trump's latest wave of tariffs, setting the stage for a fierce coast-to-coast power struggle. Is this a battle to defend a state's survival or political theater in a national crisis? As of April 16, 2025, California has become the very first state to sue the Trump administration over sweeping tariffs recently hammered on most of America's major trading partners. Speaking from the heart of the Central Valley, the almond orchards that feed the world, Governor Newsom issued a stark warning. No state is poised to lose more than the state of California. And the lawsuit, unveiled with both urgency and drama, targets Trump's invocation of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, or IEEPA, as the legal backbone for imposing tariffs, without any green light from Congress. To understand the sheer scale of this conflict, let's talk numbers and livelihoods. California is an economic juggernaut with nearly $675 billion in two-way trade in the last year alone. Its top trading partners, Mexico, Canada, and China, represent critical lifelines for local businesses and farms. According to Newsom, 43% of California's almonds, pistachios, and dairy products are export-dependent. And this storm of tariffs isn't just paperwork, it's an existential threat. The governor didn't mince words. President Trump's unlawful tariffs are wreaking chaos on California families, businesses, and our economy, driving up prices and threatening jobs. So what exactly is California up against? Since early April 2025, President Trump has deployed the IEEPA to roll out a baseline 10% tariff on all imported goods, cranked up taxes on imports from Mexico, Canada, and China, and hit autos and aluminum with even steeper levies. These actions have set industries on edge and pushed prices higher for everyday consumers. Polling tells a story of national unease. A CBS survey finds that 58% of Americans oppose these tariffs. Yet the White House remains defiant, with spokesman Kush Desai firing back, instead of focusing on California's rampant crime, Gavin Newsom is spending his time trying to block President Trump's historic efforts. Key to the lawsuit is the argument over the limits of presidential power. Newsom and Bonta claim the IEEPA was never designed to let the president slap sweeping taxes on imports without Congress. Attorney General Bonta underscores the urgency, declaring, "The gravity and instability of the situation at hand cannot be overstated." The legal complaint, filed in the U.S. District Court for Northern California, demands the immediate voiding of Trump's tariff orders. Their core allegation? That President Trump has been inventing bogus national emergencies to bypass the constitutional role of Congress, seizing power never granted to the executive. He is betraying people that supported him. Donald Trump has turned his back on his supporters, Newsom charged, painting the president's move as nothing less than an act of political abandon. But this is more than a legal parsing of statutes. What's at stake is the fate of California's vast export economy, where nearly half the crop, dairy, and manufacturing output heads overseas. The uncertainty looming over farmers, small business owners, and workers is profound. California's attorneys argue the tariffs are more than unlawful. They are a clear and present danger to the pronounced and profound economic well-being of the state. Yet the power struggle is hardly one-sided. Supporters of Trump's tariffs argue drastic action is needed to protect American industries and spur domestic reinvestment, seeing the president's move as a needed stand against decades of lopsided trade deals. Critics, however, are sounding alarms over the chaos and pain inflicted on states that count on open trade. As the lawsuit ripples through federal court, the entire country is left watching. Is this the beginning of a sweeping revision of presidential power over U.S. trade, Or just another round in a bitter red versus blue battle? Governor Newsom's suit marks the 14th, some say 15th time, California has led the charge against the Trump administration since his return to office. But never before has the financial future of so many hung so precariously in the balance. Where do you stand on this clash of titans? Is this courageous state leadership fighting for the people, or obstruction standing in the way of America's future? Sound off in the comments and subscribe for more breaking political drama and expert analysis right here